What happens when prejudice collides with power in the most unexpected way? Picture this: a world-class airport lounge, a space designed for the elite. A young black woman, tired from a long flight, is publicly humiliated and thrown out by staff who decided she just didn't belong. They judged her clothes, her age, her very presence. But they made one catastrophic mistake. They never asked her name. In the next few minutes, you're going to witness the story of Celine Vaughn and how a single act of bigotry triggered a chain reaction that threatened to bring a billion-dollar airline to its knees. This isn't just a story about karma. It's a story about what happens when the person you disrespect turns out to be the one who holds all the cards. Stay tuned, because this gets intense. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was a familiar symphony of chaos. The screech of rolling luggage wheels on polished floors, the cacophony of a dozen languages mingling in the high-vaulted ceilings, the distant automated voice announcing departures for cities Celine Vaughn could only vaguely place on a map. For most, it was a stressful liminal space, a means to an end. For Celine, it was something more. It was a testament to her father's ambition. She moved through the world with a quiet confidence that was often mistaken for aloofness. She was returning from an architectural studies program in Milan, and the exhaustion was bone deep. The creative fervor, the late nights poring over blueprints of Renaissance cathedrals, the pressure of her final presentation, it had all culminated in a draining flight back to New York. All she wanted was peace. She wore what she always wore for long-haul flights: comfort elevated to an art form, a pair of Loro Piana cashmere joggers in a soft dove gray, a simple white silk blend top from the row, and a pair of pristine, well-loved golden goose sneakers. Her hair was braided back in intricate cornrows that fell past her shoulders. Her only luggage, apart from a large checked-in suitcase, was a dark olive Telfar shopping bag that held her laptop, sketchbook, and a worn copy of Invisible Cities. She looked less like a typical college student and more like an off-duty creative director, a portrait of understated luxury. It was a language of style few could read, and one many would misinterpret. As she navigated the throngs of people, she bypassed the usual chaotic dance of Terminal 4. A private car had met her on the tarmac, a perk of her first-class ticket, and whisked her through a discreet secondary customs channel. Now she was heading toward her connecting flight to Boston. But with a long layover, her destination was the newly opened pride of the airport, the Meridian. The Meridian wasn't just a terminal. It was a statement, a privately funded project designed to be the most seamless and luxurious travel hub in North America. Gleaming, futuristic, and meticulously engineered for the flow of human traffic, it was the brainchild of her father, Callum Drake. He didn't just own a piece of it. His firm, Drake Equity Group, had orchestrated the entire deal, from funding and construction to leasing the retail and operational spaces. Every polished marble tile, every soaring glass panel, every biometric scanner bore the invisible fingerprint of his life's work. For Celine, walking through it was like walking through a family photo album, albeit one rendered in steel and glass. Her connecting flight was with Global Air, a legacy carrier that had fought tooth and nail to secure its position as the anchor airline for the Meridian. They had poured a fortune into their flagship lounge, the Zenith, promising an experience that was second to none. This would be Celine's first time seeing it. She found the entrance nestled between a Hermes boutique and a high-end watch shop. Two frosted glass doors slid open with a whisper, revealing a serene, climate-controlled world, a stark contrast to the terminal's hum. The lighting was soft, the air scented with a subtle custom blend of white tea and bergamot. A sleek obsidian black desk stood at the entrance, manned by a woman who looked like she was carved from the same stone. Her name tag read Vivian Langford, lounge manager. She was a woman with a severe blonde bob that looked like it could cut glass, and a gaze that seemed to be conducting a constant critical audit of her surroundings. Her smile, when it appeared, didn't reach her eyes. "Good afternoon," Vivian said, her voice crisp and devoid of warmth. "Hi," Celine replied, pulling out her phone to show her digital boarding pass. Just flying to Boston. Celine Vaughn. Vivian's eyes did a swift, dismissive scan, from the sneakers to the braids to the joggers. It was a fractional, almost imperceptible inventory, but Celine felt its weight. It was a look she had felt before in different high-end shops, restaurants, and galleries. The look that questioned her presence. Boarding pass, Vivian stated, not as a request, but a demand. Celine held up her phone. The screen glowed with the clear markings. First class, seat 1A. Vivian took a moment longer than necessary, her eyes narrowing slightly. She tapped a few keys on her terminal. There's a dress code, Vivian said, her gaze landing pointedly on Celine's joggers. We strive to maintain an atmosphere of business casual elegance. Celine blinked, taken aback. These are Loro Piana, she said, the words leaving her mouth before she could stop them. It sounded pretentious, and she immediately regretted it. She wasn't one to name-drop brands. I don't care if they were spun from gold by angels, Vivian retorted, a smug little smirk playing on her lips. They're sweatpants, but, she sighed dramatically, as if making a great concession, I'll make an exception this time. Try to be discreet. The condescension was thick enough to taste. Try to be discreet. As if she were a problem to be managed. The exhaustion that had been a dull ache in her bones sharpened into a hot spike of irritation, but she was too tired to fight. A confrontation would only drain her further. Thank you, Celine said, her voice tight. She walked past the desk, feeling Vivian's eyes on her back. The lounge was beautiful, a masterclass in modern design. Eames chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the runways, a fully stocked bar with a marble countertop that seemed to stretch for miles. It was also sparsely populated. A few businessmen in suits murmured into their phones. A couple in their 60s read novels by the window. Celine found a secluded nook in the back, a small alcove with a single leather armchair, and most importantly, a power outlet. She sank into the chair with a sigh, pulling out her laptop and charger. She just needed to charge her devices, maybe sketch a little and disappear for a few hours. She plugged in her charger and was about to plug it into her laptop when a junior staff member approached her. He was young, with a nervous energy and a name tag that read Reed. He was clearly trying to emulate Vivian's authoritative air, but it came across as awkward and officious. "Ma'am," he began, "I'm sorry, but that outlet is reserved for our cleaning crews." Celine looked at the perfectly standard empty wall outlet, then at the dozens of other identical outlets she could see around the room, many of them unused. "The cleaning crews?" she asked, confused. "There's no one here." "It's policy," Reed said, puffing his chest out slightly. "There are designated charging stations near the business center." The business center was a brightly lit communal table at the front of the lounge, directly under the watchful eye of Vivian at the front desk, the opposite of the quiet, discreet corner she had deliberately chosen. This felt less like a policy and more like targeted harassment. First the clothes, now this. They were trying to make her feel unwelcome, to nudge her out of the shadows and into a place where they could keep an eye on her. "This is ridiculous," Celine murmured, more to herself than to him. Reed's eyes darted toward Vivian at the front desk, who gave him a subtle, almost imperceptible nod of approval. He was performing for an audience of one. "Policy is policy," he repeated, his voice gaining a new, unearned confidence. The calm Celine had been desperately clinging to began to fray. Her father had spent years, billions of dollars, and countless sleepless nights to build this place, to create an oasis of seamless, respectful travel. And here, in the flagship lounge of his flagship terminal, his own daughter was being hassled over a power outlet because the staff didn't like the look of her. The irony was so bitter it almost made her want to laugh. But she didn't. Instead, a cold, quiet anger began to crystallize within her. She was about to comply, to move to the business center just to avoid a scene, but something inside her stopped her. No, not this time. She looked from Reed's nervous face to Vivian's smug one. They had no idea who she was, and they were about to learn. Celine took a slow, deliberate breath, trying to anchor herself. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, a lesson he'd instilled in her since she was old enough to understand. Never lose your composure in a negotiation, Celine. The moment you show emotion, you've given them power. This wasn't a boardroom, but it felt like a negotiation nonetheless, a negotiation for her dignity. She looked at Reed, but her words were meant for the woman at the front desk. "Can you please show me where this policy is written?" she asked, her voice even and calm. "I've been in dozens of first-class lounges, and I've never heard of outlets being reserved for cleaning staff, especially when they're not in use." Reed faltered. His entire script was based on the simple expectation of compliance. A question requiring evidence was beyond his training. He glanced nervously toward Vivienne again, like a soldier seeking orders from his commander. Vivienne saw her opening. This was no longer a delegated task. It was time for the manager to step in and assert her authority. She pushed back from her desk and walked toward Celine's alcove, her heels clicking against the floor with metronomic precision. Each click was a hammer blow to the lounge's carefully curated tranquility. "Is there a problem here?" Vivienne asked, arriving at the scene. Her question was a formality. She was the problem. "Yes," Celine replied, meeting her gaze. "I was just asking your colleague to see the written policy about this power outlet." Vivienne let out a short, sharp laugh that was more of a scoff. "We don't need to write down every single rule of decorum, young lady. It's a matter of courtesy. This is a shared space." "I am aware," Celine said, her patience thinning to a razor's edge. "I am sharing it by sitting quietly in a corner, bothering no one. The only disturbance is being caused by your staff harassing me over a perfectly functional outlet." The word, harassing, hung in the air, electric and dangerous. Vivienne's face tightened, the mask of professional condescension slipping to reveal a foundation of pure spite. "You have a rather elevated opinion of yourself, don't you?" Vivienne hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You waltz in here in your pajamas, demand privileges, and then accuse my staff of harassment. I think I know what's really going on." Celine's blood ran cold. "And what would that be?" "People like you," Vivienne said, her voice dripping with insinuation. "You get a taste of luxury, maybe through a gift or a one-time upgrade, and you think you own the place. You don't know how to act. You don't belong here. And your behavior is making our actual members uncomfortable." The accusation was so outrageously false, so steeped in prejudice, that Celine was momentarily stunned into silence. She looked around. The businessmen were now overtly staring. Their quiet conversations paused. The older couple by the window looked down into their books, feigning ignorance. No one was uncomfortable because of her. They were uncomfortable because of the scene Vivienne was creating. A few rows away, a woman with a sleek laptop and a journalist's observant eyes, Corinne Hale, discreetly angled her phone on the table, a tiny red dot indicating it was recording. She'd been watching the entire exchange, her instincts screaming that this was more than just a customer service dispute. "My behavior?" Celine finally said, her voice trembling slightly, not with fear but with rage. "I have done nothing but sit here. You are the one creating a scene." "That's it. I've had enough of your attitude," Vivienne snapped, her authority now absolute in her own mind. "I am revoking your access to this lounge. You need to leave. Now." "On what grounds?" Celine demanded, standing up. She was taller than Vivienne, and for a moment the manager seemed taken aback by her sudden proximity. "On the grounds that I am the manager, and your presence is disruptive. You violated our code of conduct by trying to charge my laptop and wearing cashmere." The absurdity of it all was dizzying. "You can take it up with the airline if you wish," Vivienne said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "But for now, you are trespassing. Reed, call security." Reed, who had been standing by like a stunned mullet, jumped into action, fumbling for his radio. "Security to the Zenith Lounge. We have a situation." Celine felt a wave of humiliation wash over her. It was one thing to be questioned, another to be actively thrown out, to be made a spectacle. The other passengers were now openly watching, their faces a mixture of pity, curiosity, and smug indifference. She was being judged, convicted, and sentenced in a kangaroo court run by a lounge manager on a power trip. She thought about her father. He would be appalled, not just as a father, but as the man whose name was synonymous with the very terminal this was happening in. He had poured his soul into creating a place of respect and efficiency, and it was being desecrated by this petty tyrant. 2 security guards arrived, their uniforms ill-fitting, their expressions bored. They were airport security, not Vivian's personal enforcers, but they responded to the call from the person in charge. "Ma'am, is there a problem?" one of them asked, addressing Vivian. "Yes," Vivian said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at Celine. "This woman is refusing to leave after being asked. She's being disruptive and causing a disturbance." The guard, a heavy-set man named Officer Brennan, turned to Celine. His eyes were tired. He'd seen this 100 times, disputes over entitlement, alcohol, or simple rudeness. He just wanted it to be over. "Ma'am, you heard her. You have to come with us," he said, his voice flat. Celine looked at his face, at Vivian's triumphant smirk, at the eyes of the other passengers. There was no winning this battle here, in this room. Fighting them would only lead to a bigger scene, perhaps even her being detained and missing her flight. The real battle wasn't here. She had a weapon far more powerful than arguing. She calmly began to pack her things, her movements precise and unhurried. She unplugged her charger, coiled the cord neatly, and placed it in her Telfar bag. She slipped her laptop into its sleeve. She was projecting an aura of calm she did not feel. Inside, a storm was raging. "I will be filing a formal complaint against both of you," she said, her voice low and steady, first to Vivian, then to Reed. "I will have your names, and you will remember mine." Vivian just smiled. "I'm sure you will. Now get out." With the 2 guards flanking her like a prisoner, Celine Vaughn was escorted out of the Zenith Lounge. The frosted glass doors slid shut behind her once again, sealing off the serene world she had been ejected from. She was left standing in the busy concourse of the terminal her father had built, her face burning with a shame and anger so profound it felt like a physical illness. She walked a few paces, her hands trembling. She leaned against a cool glass wall, the noise of the airport crashing back in on her. She took out her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen, past her contacts, past her friends, to the one name at the top of her favorites list. She pressed the call button. It rang once. "Hi, sweetie," a deep, warm voice answered. "Everything okay?" Tears welled in her eyes, hot and sudden. Her voice broke as she spoke the single word that would unleash a hurricane. "Dad." High above Park Avenue, in a boardroom with a commanding view of Central Park, Callum Drake was in his element. The room was a study in muted power. Gray flannel walls, a vast mahogany table polished to a mirror shine, and a dozen of the sharpest legal and financial minds in New York. They were in the final grueling stages of closing a multi-billion-dollar deal with a Japanese tech conglomerate. The air was thick with the scent of money, ambition, and lukewarm coffee. Callum was a lion of a man. Broad-shouldered, with a presence that filled any room he entered, he possessed a stillness that was more intimidating than any overt display of power. When he spoke, his voice was a low, resonant baritone that commanded absolute attention. He was known for his laser focus and his unnerving ability to dismantle a flawed argument with a single quiet question. His phone, a sleek, unassuming device, was set face down on the table beside his leather-bound notepad. It was a rule. No one interrupted these meetings. Not his COO, not the mayor, not even his wife. The only exception, the one person with the power to bypass every protocol, was Celine. His phone was programmed to emit a specific, subtle vibration only for her calls. In the middle of his lead counsel's presentation on regulatory hurdles, he felt it. A soft, insistent buzz against the mahogany. Buzz, buzz, buzz. He ignored the first. Maybe a misdial. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It came again. His focus, once a laser beam on the presentation, fractured. Celine never called twice in a row unless it was an emergency. A cold knot of dread tightened in his stomach. He discreetly placed a hand on the phone to still it. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The third time. That was their signal. The "I'm not okay" signal. Without a word, Callum Drake stood up. The entire room fell silent. His lead counsel, a man who charged an extraordinary hourly rate, stopped mid-sentence. The Japanese executives looked up, startled. Callum held up a single, calming hand. 5 minutes, he said, his voice betraying nothing. He walked out of the boardroom and into the soundproof sanctuary of his private office. He took a deep breath the way a diver does before plunging into icy water and answered, "Hi, sweetie. Everything okay?" And then he heard it. The one sound that could shatter his legendary composure. His daughter's voice, thick with tears, trying and failing to be strong. "Dad, the world of high finance, of mergers and acquisitions, of regulatory hurdles and billion-dollar figures dissolved into nothing. He was no longer Callum Drake, the titan of industry. He was just a father whose daughter was hurting. "Celine, what is it? Where are you?" he asked, his voice a mixture of alarm and gentleness. Through choked sobs, she recounted the entire story. The joggers, the outlet, Vivian's sneering condescension, Reed's pathetic power play, the humiliation of being escorted out by security. She told it quickly, the words tumbling out in a rush of shame and fury. Callum listened without interruption, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his phone. He walked to the vast window overlooking the city, but he wasn't seeing the view. He was seeing his daughter, alone in the crowded terminal he had built, being made to feel small. It was a violation on every conceivable level. It was a personal attack on his family and a professional desecration of his legacy. The disrespect was galling, but the prejudice behind it was what ignited a cold, controlled inferno within him. "Which lounge was this, Celine?" he asked, his voice now dangerously quiet. "The Zenith," she whispered. "Global Air." 2 words, that's all he needed. "Okay," he said, his tone shifting. The father was receding, and the strategist was taking over. "Listen to me very carefully. Are you okay? Are you safe?" "I'm fine, just angry and embarrassed." "Don't be embarrassed. Be angry. Anger is a motivator. Now stay exactly where you are. I'm sending someone to you. Don't talk to anyone from the airline. Don't answer any questions. Just wait. Do you understand?" "Yes, Dad. I love you. I'm handling this." He hung up. For a full 10 seconds, he stood motionless, his back to the room. Then he turned, walked back to the boardroom door, and opened it. "David," he said, locking eyes with his lead counsel. "Handle the rest. Offer them the final concession on the intellectual property clause. Close it." He didn't wait for a response. He strode back into his office, his movements now sharp and purposeful. He made 2 calls. The first was to Tristan, the head of his personal security detail, a former Secret Service agent. "Tristan, I need you at JFK Meridian Terminal immediately. Celine is there, outside the Global Air Zenith Lounge. Find her. Stay with her. She is not to be disturbed until I arrive." The second call was to a number that wasn't on any public list. It was the private cell phone of Sterling Hale, the CEO of Global Air. Hale was on a golf course in Connecticut, trying to close a deal of his own with a new aviation partner. He saw the name Callum Drake flash on his screen, and his heart skipped a beat. A call from Drake could mean one of 2 things. Either the monumental terminal deal was finally ready to be signed, or something was catastrophically wrong. "Callum, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Hale said, his voice booming with forced bonhomie. "Sterling." Callum's voice was arctic. "I'm on my way to JFK. I am personally going to visit your Zenith Lounge in the Meridian Terminal." Hale's smile froze. This was not a "let's sign the deal" call. "Oh, a surprise inspection. We're always happy to show off our flagship location. I can have my VP of Customer Experience meet you there, give you the grand tour." "That's a fine idea, Sterling," Callum said. "But this isn't a tour. Your staff has just kicked my daughter out of that lounge, and in doing so, they have placed our entire agreement in jeopardy." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. Hale could hear the blood roaring in his ears. The terminal deal wasn't just another contract. It was the cornerstone of Global Air's entire North American strategy for the next 2 decades. It was worth billions in projected revenue and would cement their status as a premier international carrier. Losing it would be a disaster of unprecedented scale.
Callum, I don't know what to say. There must be some misunderstanding.
Hale stammered, his mind racing. There is no misunderstanding, Drake cut in, his voice like chipping ice. I will be there shortly. I suggest your senior management be there to greet me. And Sterling, do not, under any circumstances, allow anyone to speak to my daughter until I arrive. The line went dead. Sterling Hale stood frozen on the pristine green of the 14th hole, his 9-iron feeling as heavy as a lead pipe. He felt a wave of nausea. A deal he had spent years of his life securing was unraveling because of an incident in a lounge. He frantically dialed a number. Get me Langford. Now. Preston Langford, Global Air's Executive VP of Customer Experience, was in a meeting about seasonal menu changes when his assistant burst in, pale-faced, and handed him a phone. Sir, it's CEO Hale. It's an emergency. Langford took the call. The next 60 seconds were a blur of shouted instructions, panic, and sheer terror. Callum Drake's daughter, kicked out of the lounge. The Meridian deal. On his way. Now. Langford felt the floor drop out from under him. He dropped the phone and ran from his office, screaming for his assistant. Get me a car. JFK, code red. Get me the file on the Meridian contract. And for God's sake, get me the name of the lounge manager at the Zenith. As Langford's car sped toward Queens, sirens blaring in his imagination, a quiet scene was playing out back in the Zenith lounge. Corinne Hale, the journalist, had packed her things and left the lounge moments after Celine was ejected. She found a shaken Celine leaning against the wall, saw a large, imposing man in a suit discreetly position himself nearby, and knew her instincts were right. This was a story. She approached carefully.
Excuse me,
Corinne said gently.
My name is Corinne Hale. I'm a journalist. I saw what happened in there. I recorded it. I just want to say I'm so sorry that happened to you. If you decide you want to tell your story, I'm here.
Before Celine could respond, Tristan, the security head, stepped forward. Thank you for your concern, ma'am. Ms. Vaughn won't be making any statements right now. Corinne nodded, understanding completely. She handed Celine her business card.
I understand. The offer stands. What they did was wrong, and people should know.
Celine took the card. She looked at the woman's earnest face, and for the first time since the ordeal began, she felt a flicker of something other than humiliation. She felt a spark of power. The atmosphere inside the Zenith Lounge had returned to its state of forced serenity, but an undercurrent of tension remained. The businessmen spoke in even more hushed tones. The couple by the window had given up pretending to read. Every passenger was acutely aware of the drama that had transpired, and a palpable sense of anticipation hung in the air. They didn't know what was coming, but they knew the story wasn't over. Vivian Langford, however, was basking in the afterglow of her victory. She stood behind her obsidian desk, a queen surveying her domain. She had faced down a challenge to her authority and won. She had expelled an element she deemed unsuitable, reinforcing the unspoken rules of her world. In her narrative, she wasn't a bigot. She was a guardian of standards, a protector of exclusivity. Reed hovered nearby, preening in her reflected glory, recounting the incident to a wide-eyed bartender. You should have seen her face, he whispered, polishing a glass, acting like she owned the place. Vivian put her right in her place. Vivian's self-satisfaction was so profound that she barely registered the frantic call that came through to the front desk from corporate headquarters. It was a panicked assistant to the EVP of Customer Experience, a name Vivian had only ever seen on mass distribution emails. Vivian, this is from Mr. Langford's office. The CEO and a very important guest are on their way to your lounge. You need to ensure everything is perfect. Vivian's ego swelled. A visit from the CEO and an important guest. This had to be about the Meridian deal. They were likely doing a final walkthrough. Her decisive action in handling the disruptive passenger would surely be seen as proof of her excellent management. She would be praised for maintaining the very standards Global Air was trying to sell to its high-value partners. Of course, Vivian said, her voice a smooth, confident purr. The lounge is always immaculate. We look forward to welcoming them. She immediately began a whirlwind of activity, ordering Reed to straighten already straight magazines, checking the temperature of the champagne, and adjusting a floral arrangement by a millimeter. She was preparing the stage for her own commendation. A short time later, the frosted glass doors of the Zenith Lounge slid open. But the scene that unfolded was not what Vivian had envisioned. It wasn't a cheerful CEO and a smiling partner. It was a phalanx. Leading the charge was Preston Langford, the EVP, his face ashen, his suit looking rumpled from a journey of pure panic. Flanking him were two men in severe dark suits who could only be lawyers, and just behind them, radiating an aura of cold, immense power, was Callum Drake. Vivian's professional smile was plastered on her face. "Mr. Langford, welcome to the Zenith. What an honor," she chirped, stepping forward to shake his hand. Langford flinched from her touch as if it were a hot iron. He didn't even look at her. His eyes were scanning the lounge, filled with a desperate, searching dread. Callum Drake's gaze, however, was locked directly on Vivian. It was a look of such chilling intensity that Vivian's practiced smile began to falter. This wasn't the look of a happy investor. This was the look of a predator. "Where is she?" Drake's voice was low, but it cut through the lounge, silencing every whisper. She who, sir?" Vivian stammered, confused. Drake didn't answer. He turned, looked back out the glass doors, and gave a slight nod. The doors slid open again, and there stood Celine, flanked by the imposing figure of Tristan. She walked in not with the shame of her earlier exit, but with the quiet, defiant dignity of someone who knew the scales were about to be balanced. She came to a stop beside her father. Vivian stared, her mind refusing to process the scene. The girl in the sweatpants, here, with the CEO's entourage, with this man. It didn't compute. Callum Drake gestured toward his daughter. "This is Celine Vaughn, my daughter." He then turned his arctic gaze back to Vivian. "You, I believe, have already met." The color drained from Vivian Langford's face. The blood in her veins seemed to turn to ice water. The carefully constructed reality she had inhabited for the past hour shattered into a million pieces. The name, Drake. Drake Equity Group, the Meridian Terminal. Her mind, in a state of sheer terror, finally connected the dots. The unsuitable girl she had thrown out was the daughter of the man who literally owned the ground beneath her feet. I didn't know," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. It was the only defense she could muster. "You didn't know," Callum repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "You didn't know she was my daughter, so the question is, would you have treated her with respect if you had known? Or is common decency in this lounge reserved only for people you think are important?" He paused, letting the question hang in the air like a death sentence. "The problem, Ms. Langford, is not that you disrespected my daughter. The problem is that you would have disrespected anyone you deemed beneath you. My daughter was just the person you were foolish enough to pick." Vivian began to stammer a frantic, incoherent string of excuses. The dress code, she was being difficult. The outlet policy. "There is no outlet policy," Langford blurted out, his voice cracking. He was trying to distance the airline and himself from this woman as quickly as possible. "There has never been an outlet policy." Reed, seeing his commander's ship sinking, immediately jumped overboard. "I was just doing what she told me to," he squeaked, pointing a trembling finger at Vivian. "She said we needed to watch people like her. She told me to call security." Vivian shot him a look of pure betrayal, but it was too late. Her entire world was imploding in real time in front of the very passengers she sought to impress. Callum Drake ignored the squabbling underlings. His focus was on Langford. "Your manager," he said, the words precise and brutal. "And her little apprentice here have just cost you the goodwill of your most important partner. They have embodied a culture of prejudice and disrespect in the flagship lounge of a terminal built on the principle of excellence. This isn't just an employee issue, Langford. This is a brand issue, a global air issue. As if on cue, a new figure stepped forward from the small crowd that had gathered. It was Corinne Hale, the journalist. "Excuse me, Mr. Drake," she said, holding up her phone. "Corinne Hale, Forbes. I have the entire incident on video, from the moment the manager first approached your daughter to the moment she was escorted out by security. The audio is crystal clear." Langford looked like he was going to be physically sick. A public relations nightmare of epic proportions was unfolding, and he was at ground zero. A viral video, a story in Forbes, the deal collapsing. His career was over. He acted with the desperate speed of a drowning man. He turned to Vivian, his face a mask of fury. "Vivian Langford," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "Your employment with Global Air is terminated effective immediately. Pack your personal belongings. A security escort, a real one this time, will see you out." He then rounded on Reed. "You too. You're fired. Get out." Vivian stared at him, her mouth agape. "You can't do this," she cried, her voice rising to a shrill panic. "I have a union. I have rights." "You have nothing," one of Drake's lawyers said, stepping forward calmly. "You've brought the airline into disrepute and likely violated several clauses of your employment contract regarding professional conduct, not to mention opening them up to a lawsuit that would make your head spin. You should leave quietly." Defeated, humiliated, and utterly broken, Vivian Langford stood stripped of her authority, her job, and her pride. The last vestiges of her power evaporated, leaving behind a desperate, trembling woman. The karma was not just hard, it was swift, public, and absolute. Security arrived, and with a quiet professionalism that was a stark contrast to their earlier casual boredom, they began to escort a sobbing Vivian and a pale, silent Reed out of the lounge, past the stunned passengers, and out of the world they had once ruled. The immediate, brutal firing of Vivian and Reed was a necessary sacrifice, but Callum Drake was far from satisfied. It was like cauterizing a wound without cleaning out the infection. The public humiliation of two mid-level employees was pure theater, a desperate, reactive spectacle designed to placate him. But Callum Drake, a man who had built an empire by seeing through such performances, was not interested in theater. He was interested in systemic change, in tearing out the rot, root and stem. As the disgraced former managers were led away, their departure leaving a vacuum in the tense air of the Zenith Lounge, a funereal silence descended. The remaining passengers tried to shrink into their expensive seats, acutely aware they were witnesses to a corporate execution. Callum turned his cool, calculating gaze back to Preston Langford, who now looked less like an executive vice president and more like a defendant, awaiting a verdict he knew would be devastating. His face was slick with a sheen of cold sweat. "Do you think that solves the problem, Mr. Langford?" Drake asked, his voice deceptively calm, the quietest thing in the room, and yet the most terrifying. "Mr. Drake, I can assure you we take this matter with the utmost seriousness," Langford stammered, his corporate training kicking in on autopilot, offering platitudes as a shield. "We will be launching a full internal investigation. We have a zero-tolerance policy for this kind of behavior. We'll be reviewing all protocols." "Save it," Drake cut him off, the words sharp as broken glass. "Save the empty jargon for your shareholders. I'm not interested in your internal investigations, which are designed to find the minimum required fault and then bury the report. I'm interested in results. The deal we had on the table, the one that makes Global Air the anchor tenant of this terminal, my terminal, is now on indefinite hold." The phrase, indefinite hold, struck Langford with the force of a physical blow. He actually swayed on his feet. The Meridian deal wasn't just a contract. It was the foundation of Global Air's entire next decade of operations. It was his career-defining achievement. "Callum, please," he implored, the desperation in his voice stripping away all formality. He took a half-step forward, his hand slightly raised as if in supplication. "We can fix this. It was the action of two rogue employees, a terrible, isolated incident. Please don't let two bad apples spoil the entire partnership." "Was it?" The voice was not Callum's. It was Celine's. She spoke for the first time since re-entering the lounge, and her voice, though quiet, sliced through Langford's desperate pleading. It held no tears, only a chilling analytical clarity. Every eye in the room swiveled to her. "Was it an isolated incident, Mr. Langford?" she continued, stepping forward to stand level with her father. When Ms. Langford first questioned my presence, she spoke of maintaining an atmosphere. When she decided I didn't belong, she said my behavior was making the actual members uncomfortable. That implies a known standard of who belongs and who doesn't. When your other staff member, Reed, hassled me over a power outlet, he kept looking to her for approval. He was performing a role he knew she would reward. When your security guards arrived, they didn't ask me a single question. They didn't assess the situation. They deferred instantly to the authority of your manager. They saw her, a white woman in a suit, and they saw me, a young black woman in joggers, and they made a judgment in less than a second. She paused, letting her words sink in, her gaze sweeping over Langford and his legal team. This wasn't two rogue employees, Mr. Langford. This was a culture where two employees felt not just empowered, but encouraged to act on their prejudices, confident that the system would back them up. They were wrong about who they picked today, but they weren't wrong about the system they were operating in. And that is a global air problem. Her analysis was so sharp, so devastatingly precise, that it silenced the entire room. She wasn't just a victim recounting a grievance. She was a witness and a prosecutor laying out an airtight case against the entire corporation. Callum Drake looked at his daughter, and behind the cold fury in his eyes, a wave of immense pride momentarily softened the hard lines of his face. She was his daughter in every way. He turned back to Langford. "My daughter is right," he stated, the finality in his tone leaving no room for argument. "So here is what is going to happen. This is not a negotiation. These are the new, non-negotiable terms for Global Air to even be considered as a future partner in the Meridian." He began to tick the points off on his fingers, each one a hammer blow to Global Air's bottom line and public image. 1. You will issue a formal public apology, not a vague corporate statement about an incident or not meeting our high standards. It will name my daughter, Celine Vaughn. It will specifically apologize for the racist and classist behavior she was subjected to by your staff. It will be signed by your CEO, Sterling Hale, personally, and it will be displayed on the homepage of your corporate website for an extended period. One of the lawyers next to Langford began to whisper frantically to him about the legal liability of such a specific admission, but Langford waved him off with a trembling hand. 2, Drake continued, ignoring the interruption. You will hire an independent third-party DEI consulting firm, one that my team reviews and approves, to conduct a comprehensive top-to-bottom audit of your company's culture, hiring practices, and promotion pipelines. I want to see the data. The findings of this audit will not be buried. They will be made public. 3. Based on the results of that audit, you will implement a mandatory company-wide retraining program on implicit bias, de-escalation, and culturally competent service. And I mean everyone, from your baggage handlers in Des Moines to Sterling Hale in his boardroom. My team will be given full oversight and will attend random sessions to ensure compliance. 4, he continued, his voice dropping lower, each word landing with immense weight. You will make a substantial 7-figure donation to a charitable foundation. The foundation will be one of my daughter's choosing, focused on providing educational and career opportunities for underprivileged youth in the transportation and architecture sectors. This is not a penalty. This is a restorative investment in the communities your culture has disrespected. He paused, letting the scale of the demands sink in. Langford looked like he might faint. And finally, Drake concluded, Corinne Hale from Forbes gets the exclusive. No other outlets. Your communications team will grant her full, unfettered access for her story. The truth will be told. It will be told completely, and it will be told through her. Let the public see how you clean up a mess of your own making. Langford stood there, utterly defeated. It was a complete and total capitulation. The financial cost would be staggering, but the cost to the brand's pride and autonomy was immeasurable. He was being dictated to like a vassal lord, his company's fate decided in a public lounge. But the alternative, losing the Meridian deal, making an enemy of Callum Drake, and the inevitable catastrophic lawsuit, was unthinkable. He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely unlock it. I need to call Sterling," he whispered. "By all means," Drake said, gesturing to a quiet corner. "Let your CEO know that the future of his airline's North American presence depends on his answer." The call was brief. Langford could be heard saying, "Yes, I understand. Every point. Yes, he's here. I'll tell him." He hung up, his face pale as death. He looked at Callum Drake. We agree," Langford choked out, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "We agree to all of it." In the days that followed, the story exploded with the force of a supernova. Corinne Hale's article, Judgment at the Gate, How a Billion-Dollar Deal Unraveled in a First-Class Lounge, went viral within an hour of publication. It was a masterful piece of journalism, detailing not just the incident, complete with damning quotes transcribed from her video, but the staggering corporate fallout. Global Air's stock plummeted. The story was everywhere, leading cable news and spawning 1,000 think pieces. Social media became a raging firestorm of outrage, with hashtags trending for days. Other people of color began sharing their own stories of mistreatment by the airline, creating a tidal wave of negative press that the company's PR department was powerless to stop. Vivian Langford's fate was a harsh, brutal lesson in modern infamy. She became the airport Karen, the face of corporate prejudice. Fired and disgraced, she found herself completely unemployable. Her name, now inextricably linked to the viral story, was a digital ghost that haunted every job application, every attempt to rebuild her life. She was a pariah, a living symbol of a problem that was so much bigger than her. Reed vanished into total obscurity, a footnote in a drama far bigger than his petty ambitions. But the story didn't end with their downfall. True to his word, Callum Drake held Global Air's feet to the fire. The humiliatingly specific apology from Sterling Hale appeared on their website. The donation was wired. The audit began, a painful public process that laid bare the company's deep-seated cultural issues. Celine, thrust into a spotlight she never sought, found an unexpected purpose. She embraced the role not as a victim, but as an architect of change. She personally selected the foundation and worked with its board to create the Celine Vaughn Scholarship for Equity in Design. She became an outspoken advocate, speaking at conferences about the insidious nature of soft prejudice in spaces of privilege, her calm eloquence making her a powerful and sought-after voice. Sometime later, Celine stood with her father in his Park Avenue office, looking down at a revised set of blueprints for the Meridian. They had just come from the inaugural board meeting of her new foundation. "You handled that perfectly, you know," Callum said, putting a heavy, proud arm around her shoulder. "Back there in the lounge, you were calm, you were precise, and you were powerful. You reminded me of, well, me." Celine smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile. "I had a good teacher. You taught me to see the structure of things, and their flaws." She pointed to an unmarked space on the blueprint, a prime retail location right next to the now infamous Zenith Lounge. "What's going in there?" Callum's eyes twinkled with a creative fire. "I was thinking of a permanent interactive exhibit," he said. "A partnership between Drake Equity and your foundation. A gallery showcasing the work of young architects and designers from diverse backgrounds. We'll call it the Horizon Gallery. A constant, visible, unavoidable reminder of what this place is supposed to be about, building new things, creating access, looking forward." He looked at his daughter, his pride immeasurable. The incident had started as an ugly, hateful act of exclusion, but from it, they had forged something new, something better. The Meridian was no longer just a monument to his financial success. It was now a testament to his daughter's strength, a symbol of a reckoning that had been long overdue, and a promise that karma hadn't just hit back. It had rebuilt something more beautiful and just in its wake. And there you have it. A story that started with a pair of cashmere joggers and ended with a corporate giant being brought to heel. What Vivian Langford and Global Air failed to understand is that respect isn't a privilege you extend to people you think are important. It's a basic standard you owe to everyone. Celine's story is a powerful reminder that you never truly know who you're talking to, and that prejudice, sooner or later, comes with a price. In this case, that price was a multi-billion-dollar deal and a very public lesson in humility. What do you think? Was the response proportional to the offense? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and make sure you're subscribed for more real-life drama where karma delivers the final verdict. Thanks for watching.